Superman, the Man of Steel, the Man of Tomorrow, a beacon of hope, and of course a DC character who hasn't had a new movie in a very long time. After sitting down and watching both of Joel Schumacher's Batman movies, it felt like the perfect time to experiment outside of my Batman related comfort zone. Out of all the superhero movies I've yet to make a video about, Superman Returns was the only movie that immediately caught my eye. If you didn't know this by now, Superman is arguably the one DC superhero I've never gotten into. Part of that is because Zack Snyder's Man of Steel tainted my opinion of Superman, so much so that I said this in my Arrowverse You Have Failed This City video. I know I'm not fully alone on this, but Man of Steel genuinely made me not want to care about Superman, watch any old Superman movies, or even read a Superman comic book run because of how much I disliked Man of Steel. Trust me, I know it was a dumb decision, but I was 16 when this happened, which was way before I ever fully dove into reading comics and heavily watching comic book media. However, after watching Superman Returns for the first time, I'm happy to say that I really like this movie, and it genuinely made me like Superman. While yes, this movie has its flaws, such as this movie's iteration of Lois Lane, Lex Luthor's pointless plan, and Superman not doing anything mind-blowing, there are other aspects to this movie that make it enjoyable for me. Superman Returns has this sense of simplicity that works only for this movie. Plus, the storytelling genuinely gives you the payoffs that you're hoping for as you watch the movie. Together, these elements put a smile on my face multiple times and reminded me that Superman is supposed to instill hope and positivity into both the viewers of any Superman-related piece of media and the citizens of Metropolis. Typically, I'd be ready to immediately fire up the bat signal, but for this video, let's lift off and fly right into Superman Returns. The best thing about Superman Returns is Brandon Routh and his iteration of Superman by far. In Superman Returns, Clark Kent grows to become a character that you can legitimately like. At the beginning of the movie, Clark is this awkward yet quirky guy that's figuring stuff out just like the rest of us. And while yes, that might be annoying to some people because he's Superman, you know, the Man of Steel, it does make sense. Canonically, at least for Superman Returns, Clark left Earth to go check on Krypton, and unbeknownst to him, Krypton was a total graveyard. As far as we know, Clark was gone for a long time, so it's fairly easy to assume, or at least fair to assume, that he was spending time coping with this major emotional revelation. So Clark coming back to Earth and struggling to be the immediate superhero you'd expect him to be makes sense. Throughout Superman Returns, the movie tells us a lot of things, to the point that I call this Gotham Syndrome. Don't worry, that'll make sense in a couple of minutes. However, in one of the turning points of the movie, Clark gets a reality check that things have changed and his everyday life on Earth that he left is no longer what it used to be. So he flies away to calm himself down, and this is what he hears in his head.
Even though you've been raised as a human being, you are not one of them.
Despite this moment not feeling like it's trying to achieve something big, this moment is pivotal. It's showing us who Clark is as a person, and despite him being gone for so long, he's still the same loving man. It's almost like in his heart, he knows that he's not human, but at the same time, he is struggling to cope with the emotions that he's dealing with due to everything that's changed in what used to be his daily life on Earth. And if that isn't beautiful enough, Superman Returns takes this part of its story and combines it with my second favorite thing about this movie, the absolutely gorgeous score. Superman Returns has one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a superhero movie, and if you watched any of my previous videos, you know that I almost never comment about a movie soundtrack. In moments where you're supposed to feel pain, the score does a beautiful job raising that emotional weight onto the viewer. In moments where you're supposed to get excited because something great is about to happen, the soundtrack does a fantastic job at uplifting the moment with an outstanding complimentary track. In moments where you're supposed to feel that sense of happiness or that sense that everything's gonna be okay, the soundtrack has amazing songs that help put a smile on your face. It's truly beautiful, and it's something that deserves a ton of credit because it truly does an outstanding job at turning Superman Returns into a positive experience. So Gotham Syndrome, let's talk about it. Superman Returns does this thing where it takes its time to show you everything. It's almost like this movie wants every bit of payoff that happens later on in the movie to make complete sense without feeling like it's left out anything storytelling wise. And if you didn't know, Gotham, the TV show based on the origins of Batman, does the same thing in its first season, so seasons 2 through 6 make complete sense narratively. In the case of Superman Returns, it almost feels like this does more harm than it does good, despite it not being a massive problem for me. Don't get me wrong, there are multiple times in Superman Returns where the scene that's currently happening is boring because what happened before the ongoing scene was way more interesting. Truthfully, it sounds worse than it actually is, but the core reason as to why it's not a problem for me is because Superman Returns respects the fact that it has a story to tell. It wants the viewer to have every bit of payoff that they're seeking. It also uses this style of storytelling to make sure that no narrative threads are forgotten to the point where the viewer's thinking, but wait, what about that? And in a way, I appreciate this style of storytelling because it's vastly different from superhero movies as we know them now. On top of that, it was also different from other superhero movies that were released during the same era of superhero movies, such as Sam Raimi's Spider-Man or Tim Story's Fantastic Four. Now, this is going to be an unpopular opinion considering one of the biggest complaints regarding Superman Returns is that it's boring, but I didn't find it as boring as people said it was. I fully understand that we all look at Superman and pretty much wish that we could get as many action scenes as possible, but that wouldn't have worked in Superman Returns. Plus, we've seen that exact contrast in Man of Steel, and we all know how I feel about that. If there were a ton of action scenes or a massive CGI enemy for Superman to fight in Superman Returns, it'd almost feel like a betrayal to Brandon Routh's Superman. The whole point of the movie is to show us Clark finding his way back into the mantle of being Superman while also maintaining a lighthearted tone throughout the movie. This specific aspect of the movie might not be repeatedly drilled into our heads just like Bruce Wayne's parents dying in an alley is drilled into our heads, but in the moments where the movie is trying to show this, it highlights Clark's growth. It's not supposed to be super action-packed and have these gigantic action scenes that blow your mind out of this world. It's not supposed to be loud and obnoxious like a certain franchise everybody knows by now, and yes, I'm looking at you, Transformers. All of the action scenes in Superman Returns are intentionally made to be highlight moments to do all of the talking without having to do any hypothetical yelling. Look at how Clark perfectly seizes the moment after saving a packed airplane that also happens to have Lois on it.
I hope this experience hasn't put any of you off flying. Statistically speaking, it's still the safest way to travel.
Look at how Clark handles a moment with someone who's acting slightly more crazy on purpose just to get his attention after he saves her life.
Just hold on tight.
Look at Clark saving a man's life by springing into action and capturing the Daily Planet globe before it smashes a crowd of people in Metropolis. And finally, look at this beautiful moment in Superman Returns that happens after Superman shows Lois how beautiful Metropolis is. The point I'm trying to make is that these amazing and simple scenes work because Superman Returns doesn't need a CGI fight or destroying Metropolis into smithereens just because the director got the green light to do so. If Superman Returns did those things, it would feel entirely out of place because that isn't what the movie is trying to achieve thematically. The point of Superman Returns is to showcase the growth of Clark as he grows into the Superman mantle and to remind the viewer that when you're being shown a Superman story, it should instill hope and positivity. And when Superman Returns is doing that exact thing, the movie is absolutely brilliant. But when it's not doing that, a few other aspects of Superman Returns fall flat. This brings me to the things that I didn't entirely like about this movie. Rather than going back and forth, we're going to discuss one topic at a time. First and foremost, Lois Lane is one of the weakest aspects of this movie. Her story arc makes little sense because she's incredibly inconsistent. Lois's story summarized is that Clark left, so she got hurt emotionally, she ends up falling in love with a new dude who feels inferior to Superman, by the way, and eventually has a kid. Along with that, she writes this massive article about why the world doesn't need Superman because of this heartbreak. And apparently it was a pretty damn good article considering she won an award for it. My problem with Lois is that she essentially hates Superman for leaving despite her fully understanding that he's Superman and there are things in his life that are bigger than her. He has people to rescue, a city to look after, a planet that he still calls home, and he has to balance whatever life he has on Earth that she doesn't know about. For what it's worth, the movie never explicitly states that Lois knows that Clark is Superman. We just know that she knows who Superman is and has some level of a history with him that took place before the story of this movie. Since we know this, I'm assuming that she doesn't know that Clark is Superman. I entirely understand that the emotional damage that was done due to him leaving, but she moved on as well. As I said, when he left, she essentially slandered him, got married, and had a whole kid. Why are you upset at him? Why are you holding such a vendetta against him? Why are you pretending like you didn't make choices for your benefit? You know he's Superman. You know he has massive responsibilities. If anyone should have been understanding of this, it's Lois. Lois isn't dumb. The movie proves that and repeatedly shows us this. She is, by no means whatsoever, a damsel in distress. It's ridiculous because on top of all of those things, she magically finds out that her kid, Jason, is Superman's son. That's right, Lois Lane, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, was entirely unaware that her kid could possibly belong to Superman. Speaking of Jason, he's nothing more than a glorified plot device that's used as a solution 2 or 3 times throughout Superman Returns. That doesn't necessarily piss me off or bother me by any means, but what bothers me is that Lois was somehow entirely unaware that her kid could have superpowers after apparently having sex with Superman. That to me is ridiculous, and it's fairly insulting to the character that Superman Returns tries to establish with this specific iteration of Lois Lane. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Narratively, it's ridiculously inconsistent and goes against the intelligence we've been shown before that revelation. And overall, it just feels like a lackluster decision because it doesn't get built upon in future Superman movies as an ongoing plot point. Unfortunately, this isn't Fast and the Furious because we never got to see the future of Superman's potential future family. While we're on the topic of inconsistencies, Lex Luthor is also another weak point that's even more confusing than Lois Lane. In a lot of scenes, Lex is the smartest dude in the room. He says a ton of ridiculous science mumbo jumbo that only makes sense to him, and truthfully, the movie leans into that. The movie has several jokes about Lex being this ridiculously overly smart yet awful villain. Superman Returns even starts with a scene that shows us Lex tricking an old woman to sign away her will while her family is locked outside of the room. However, Lex's plan in Superman Returns makes little to no sense. In fact, it contradicts his intelligence entirely because his plans make zero sense. While yes, Superman Returns does a decent job at giving the main character screen time, when it comes to Lex, it still doesn't feel like enough. It doesn't feel like enough because it feels like there are parts of his plans that weren't explained that should have been explained, if that makes sense. Like, his whole grand idea is that he wants to make an island out of kryptonite that'll eventually outgrow the US and put the US underwater. When Lois mentions people stopping him, he even says, what are they gonna do while he's on his island? And that makes sense. What doesn't make sense is why he wants to do that. Sure, I understand being this ridiculously crazy, over-the-top comic book villain, but he's not just a ridiculous comic book villain. He's a very intelligent man, and the movie shows us that almost every time he's on screen. So, for someone that truly is that smart, what's the grand plan? What are his intentions long term? Surely there has to be more than that, right? I mean, I could understand if someone were to tell me, oh, he wants to take over the world. That's his grand plan, taking over the universe.
What do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
Look, as much as I want to believe that, and as simple as that assumption might be, I don't think that matches up to the persona of Lex Luthor. He's far too over the top, and he's incredibly smart to the point where it's intentionally obnoxious. As far as I'm concerned, Lex having a simple plan of taking over the universe without some sort of subplot to coincide with this grand scheme just doesn't seem viable. If anything, his plans in Superman Returns feels half-baked, and if I had to choose, this would be the one thing that legitimately bothered me about Superman Returns, because Lex had so much potential to be a fantastic villain in this movie. Since I've now discussed the two major problems that I have with Superman Returns, I guess it's time that we've addressed the elephant in the room. In Superman Returns, there's a scene where Superman goes to Lois's house and watches her as she talks to her husband. In this moment, Superman hears Lois say that she never loved him, and he flies away from where he was to hover as he looks down on Earth. A lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, dislike this scene and take it as Superman blatantly stalking Lois for absolutely no reason. Here's my hot take. That scene isn't bad, and it's an important part of Superman's growth in Superman Returns. At that moment, we're learning more about Superman's emotions, his loneliness, and how hurt he truly is due to how much Lois has changed in 5 years. And at the same time, we're also being given symbolism, showing that even in a moment where Clark is feeling emotionally isolated and has a moment of self-reflection, he still manages to be the guardian he's meant to be. As he hovers over Earth, he listens to every sound of every person, animal, and thing, checking that the world is safe, and as soon as he hears an alarm, he flies into action despite his emotional state. The movie is trying to show us what happens when someone like Clark is too pure of heart and how that can backfire on him. He didn't do that because he's looking for something out of Lois. He did that because he was simply making sure that she was okay, considering he felt guilty after her reaction to him coming back to Earth. Everyone knows that Clark is a man with good intentions, and at that point during the movie, he was just trying to check up on Lois, considering he clearly felt guilty for leaving her for 5 years. Could he have gone about it another way? Yes, absolutely. However, there was a specific intention with that scene, and in my eyes, it conveys exactly what it's attempting to convey. Also, a large part of that is also due to the amazing score of this movie uplifting a scene such as this one, which allows Superman Returns to tell its story. When I think of Superman Returns, I think of a movie that's truly underappreciated. I think of a brilliant iteration of Superman. I think of a movie that has an outstanding score that deserves so much recognition. And more importantly, I think of a movie that deserves a lot of love. Superman Returns is a movie that's intentionally soft and lighthearted. Sure, it has its weaknesses and it has its moments where it's explaining too many details to make its story make sense, but it's hard to hate this movie. Is it different compared to most of the comic book movies we know and love? Yes, it is. But at the same time, this case of being different is good. Superman Returns puts a smile on your face. It reminds you of hope and love. It instills a sense of positivity. And the ending of the movie conveys the perfect cliche quote, "Everything's gonna be okay." How does it do so? By showing us that Clark is happy after saving the day as he flies in space, ready to spring into action if he's needed. It's the happy ending that I was personally hoping for when I was watching this movie. Look, no comic book movie is perfect, and I'm always down to give every terrible decision shit, but I really don't think that I can do so when it comes to such a positive movie. You know what's even more beautiful? We got to see the man Clark grew into thanks to DC's massive TV event, Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Even in the darkest times, hope cuts through. Hope is the light that lifts us out of darkness.
I just hope that one day, somehow or some way, Brandon Routh gets to play his iteration of Superman for his own show or movie again. I hope that the stars align and DC somehow makes this happen because his iteration of Superman is my Superman. It's that blatant. His Superman is a man of hope, a man of tomorrow, the Man of Steel, and more importantly, a fantastic Superman. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you really enjoyed this video, hit that sub button. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, write a comment down below. Don't forget to keep it real with peace, love, and positivity.